outside of the subroutines, I have one single print statement. But this print statement is going to be long. Okay? So we're going to make it like print, invoke, add. But the first parameter of add is coming from another invoke statement. So invoke clone, in this case, well, let's specify 7 goes to x. The result of the invoke clone is going to parameter x of add. I have another invoke clone, let's say 15, and the result of that invoke goes to y. That is my program. This is what we're going to trace. What do you think? Well, first of all, how many columns do you think it will consume? You already know that add will take 3 columns. One for the return info, one for x, one for y. It takes up 3 columns. You already know that clone will take up 2 columns, return info and parameter x. And I'm stacking up the invokes like this. So the question is, just for the invocations, not counting line number, not counting the comments, how many columns do I need just to deal with the subroutines? You don't have to tell me your answer, okay? I think the typical answer will be like 3, 5, or 7, okay? Because if you add up the 2 invoked clones, 2 columns each, and then plus the 3 columns of add, that's 7 columns. If you take the maximum, then it is 3 columns for add and 2 columns for clones, so that makes the maximum 3. If you think the 2 invoked clones can share the same 2 columns, that makes it 5, because the 2 clones will use 2 columns, and then on top of that, you have the add to consume 3 columns. Okay, so I think those 3 choices will be kind of like logical choices: 3, 5, or 7. Okay, so we'll go ahead and trace this program and find out exactly how many columns do we need just to deal with the subroutines. Let's go ahead and save the file before I forget. Okay. So this one I will call it invoke in invoke, because we have an invoke statement inside an invoke statement, and the whole thing is specified as what to supply the value to print in the end. So the trick to display both the code and the trace at the same time is to move this one to the lower left corner and then open up a new window, just so that these two do not overlap too much, like that. Now I can use sheet 2 to trace the code and still be able to see the entire program, even though line 10 is super duper long. Okay. So here's my trace. We need 1 column for comments because we are printing at the very end, but I don't need that column until the very end. So we can start with just line number at this point. The precondition, there's nothing to say because I don't have any global variables. Are we doing okay so far? Now we execute line 10. Tell me what I need to do first with line 10. We got quite a few things that we have to do, right? I know eventually we want to print something. Am I ready to print at this point?
No.
No, because I have to print whatever add is returning, right? Am I ready to invoke add at this point? No, because I don't have all the pieces available yet. I don't know what to pass to parameter x and what to pass to parameter y of add. What do I need to do first?
Invoke clone.
Invoke clone. And if I follow the left to right order, then I'm invoking clone with 7 as my parameter first, right? So that's what we're going to do first. We are invoking clone, but because clone returns a value, it means that we have to use return info instead of return line number. Is that making any sense? Because we have to go back to the same line to continue on other operations on that same line. And just like before, the return info is almost an exact copy of the line that it is coming from, It is on line 10. It's a print statement. It has an invoke add, which is not the invocation I'm taking care of at this point, so I'm just copying that the way it is. However, the invoke clone with 7 is the invocation I'm taking care of at this point, and that's why that invocation is replaced by a question mark. Because the question mark is a placeholder to remind myself where do I put the return value when I execute return. Whatever it returns goes to parameter x. And then the second invocation is also not something I'm taking care of at this point. Therefore, I just copy that verbatim from the source code. Are there any questions about why return info looks like this at this point? Yep.
Why didn't the invoke clone have a question mark in it too?
Sorry?
Why didn't the invoke clone have a question mark in it?
Because I can only invoke one. I can only invoke one at a time. There are two separate invoke clones here on line 10. I cannot invoke clone for both cases at the same time because I only have a single threaded processor. The processor can only invoke one subroutine at a time, and that's why I choose to invoke or deal with the one that is on the left, because most people read from left to right. Okay? The one that I'm not taking care of, I just copy the whole thing. Okay, that is important. Okay, and then I use column D as my parameter x. And what should I write here? What is parameter x to clone? 7. Very good. It's right here. The 7 is right there. So I just write a 7 here, and that makes my column D. Okay. Once I set up how to return and the parameter, I can go into the subroutine clone starting on line 3. The only action line is line 3. It returns x. What do I do when I return a value? 2 steps. Copy and paste the return info cell and replace the question mark with whatever I'm supposed to return, right? So we're going to do exactly that. We copy and paste this entire cell. We find out where the question mark is. Okay, the question mark is right here. And I replace the question mark itself with the value that I'm supposed to return. You look at line 3, it's supposed to return x. What is x? X has a value of 7. So I'm just returning a value of 7, which means once I locate where the question mark is, I replace that with a value of 7. Yep.
Why did we go to line 3?
Why do we go to line 3?
Yeah.
Because we are invoking clone.
Instead of like 8, line 8?
Because we're invoking clone. We're not invoking add yet. This is add.
Even though it's coming first and simultaneously.
Because we can't do it. Yeah, because you don't know what you're adding yet. And that's why we are not invoking add yet. Okay? Okay, it's just like this. Okay. Instead of using subroutines, if I give you something like this, okay, if I give you 5 plus 7 and the whole thing times 12, okay, something like that. Should I take care of the multiplication operator first, or should I take care of the addition first? The addition first. So that means, until I know the result of 5 plus 7, I don't even want to think about the multiplication. It's the same way here. It's because the add subroutine requires to know, it needs to know what is its own x parameter and its own y parameter before it can start execution. And that's why I have to take care of both of the invoke clones before I can invoke add. Okay, that's line 3. Line 3 is all done. We go to line 4. Line 4 is the end of a subroutine. We deallocate column C and column D. And according to the return info, we are returning back to line 10. But line 10 does not look like this anymore because one of the invocations is already resolved. It resolved to a value of 7. What should I do next?
Copying and pasting, but put a question mark or
Exactly. We should take care of the other invoke clone at this point, because I have to take care of all the invoke clones before I can invoke add. So the next one, the next invocation is this one here. So I copy and paste this one here, and I replace the invocation I'm taking care of at this point with a single question mark. And this time I also have to remember to pass parameter x. Oops, I think I just made a mistake here. Okay, there we go. What do I put here for parameter x this time? 15, right? I mean, 15 comes from here. And then I go to line 3. Once again, line 3 is just returning x itself. I copy and paste the return info cell, replace the question mark with the value that I'm returning, and I'm done. Then we go to line 4. Line 4 doesn't do a whole lot. It just deallocates the 2 columns that we have allocated at this point. Then we go back to line 10, because return info tells me to go back to line 10. Line 10 now looks like this. What is my next step?
Add subroutine.
We can invoke add at this point. Very good. When we invoke add, we also have to specify a return info cell. We copy and paste this one here, except invoke add itself this time is replaced by a single question mark, because that's the invocation that I'm taking care of, that I'm executing this time. This time we have 2 parameters. We have x and we also have y. Parameter x according to this is 7. Parameter y according to this is 15. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. Then we go into the subroutine. The subroutine add has a single line that is useful, which is line 8. Line 8 says return x plus y. Parameter x has a value of 7. Parameter y has a value of 15. 7 plus 15 is 22. So we are returning a value of 22. That means we go to the return info cell, we copy and paste it, and replace the question mark with the value of 22.
I'm wondering why like with the other subroutine, every time we did another subroutine, we went to the right and we allocated more columns. Why wouldn't you do the return info? Everything is in the same column. Why did it go to the right?
Because clone returns, the first clone returns before we invoke clone again. So the columns are deallocated and then they are reallocated immediately afterwards. Okay? Whereas in the other cases that we have seen, especially with recursion, one invocation has not returned yet when we invoke again. So we cannot reuse the same columns because they have not been deallocated. But in this case, if you look at row 6 of the trace and row 10 of the trace, both invocations have finished, and the columns, as a result, have been deallocated when we have to invoke again. And that's why we can reuse the same columns again. Okay, this is line 8. All line 8 does is to replace the question mark with 22. I don't really care about the rest of that line, because I'm only replacing the question mark. After line 8, we go to line 9, which is the end of this subroutine. So we merge all these columns, say that they're all deallocated at this point, and according to return info, we have to go back to line 10. But this time, line 10 looks just like this, print a value of 22. We know how to do that. Just print a value of 22 to the screen, to a piece of paper, whatever the output is, and we're done. Are there any questions about this trace? We only use 3 additional